Hello and welcome back to the channel where I'm joined again by with Conor McKenna. In this episode, we're going to be discussing the Hurling Championship from the weekend. We had semi-finals in Leinster and Munster. We had Joe McDonagh, Christy Ring, Nicky, Rackard, and Lory Meagher matches. So thanks to Conor for joining me again. So what we'll do is we will start in the Leinster Hurling Championship. The action got underway in that competition. The semi-final action got underway with Kilkenny and Dublin. Kilkenny had the game won and really had to win the game twice by the time Dublin come back in sort of the last 10 minutes. What did you make of the game? How do you think that will affect both teams moving forward?
Well, for a start, they were 16 points up with 48 minutes left, and Dublin had a back level late on. But I think, to be honest, Gerry, Kilkenny, they got the win. They had to win the game twice, and I suppose what's probably more important is they did win the game twice. Like, a lot of the time when they were 16 points up and the team got back level, Kilkenny I wouldn't say they would have folded, but the momentum might have pushed Dublin over the line, and Kilkenny went and they got the next two scores. They kept their composure and they won the game. So they've been very, very pleased. They're playing Dublin away from home, practically, in Croke Park now. But I think this is where the empty stadium really played a factor, because if you had Dublin and Kilkenny on the ropes, and Kilkenny don't traditionally bring massive support, Dublin, it would have been absolutely packed out. The Hill H, there was even a few more Dublin fans. It really could have pushed them over the line. That really could have. But the momentum, Kilkenny kept their composure, won the game. Cody won't be happy with how they let Dublin back in the game. But no, I think Dublin definitely. I think both sides can take positive. But again, it's another day where Dublin have lost a close game like that, and Kilkenny, they've got the win. Look, they'll take it. They're in the Leinster final. But if they let Galway in the game like that now, they won't be Leinster champions.
I think as you say, that the crowd would have made such a difference in that game. Even without the crowd, there was even like a stage where Kilkenny, you almost felt like they were a wee bit unnerved. Just the way they missed a couple of very scoreable chances before they, Dublin did equalise, and then they finally did get back over the line. But you've mentioned then that Kilkenny will play Galway in the final, and I watched the majority of the game against Wexford, and Galway were very, very good. What did you think of their performance?
Yeah, I thought Galway were very, very good. I definitely go along with that. I think that Galway actually came into this championship completely under the radar. How, I don't know, because they were All-Ireland champions in 2017, were a point away from doing so in 18, and in 2019 they went out on score difference miraculously. It was a freak series of Southern Gouch. So Galway, and they've won 3 All-Ireland minors in a row, and they've players coming through. And I think this was maybe a new Galway team. They stepped up to the plate. They didn't mess around. They had no real complicated system really in place. It was very, very straightforward hurling, yet very, very efficient. And I think that Galway are pound for pound the best team in Leinster. I think that they hope to do themselves justice by winning the Leinster title. They've won Leinster titles in 17 and 18, 2017, 2018. They have won 4. I think they've won 4 Leinster titles, or 3. Are they going 4? Have they won? I think they've won 4 since joining the competition, or maybe it's 3. It could be 3 actually, but they're going for 4 anyway. So they've done well since joining the Leinster Championship, and they'll be very, very pleased to have gotten over the line against Wexford. Wexford were very, very disappointing on the day. Davy Fitz said as much after the game. They didn't perform, didn't get going at all. They'll have a lot to ponder on for the next 2 weeks now. But no, I think Galway were by far the better team, and I think Galway did themselves justice, and they're in the Leinster final.
Okay, and obviously then there was the 2 semi-finals in Munster as well. The game on Saturday, I think a few people thought that Cork would beat Waterford, but in the end Waterford come through 128 to 124. And looking at that scoreline, from watching the game and how the game went, it feels almost like that scoreline was a bit closer than how the game felt. Did you feel that way, or did you think it was tight enough? Or
most definitely, Gerry. I thought Waterford were by far the better team. It kind of pandered out as I expected that if Cork would have had to have gotten top early if they were going to win the game, because Waterford, I knew if it went to a dogfight, Waterford would have that more fighting than the work rate. Like Cork, it's the same Cork. They they lied down when things didn't go their way, and it's just, I don't know. I just don't know, Gerry. Are they, because was the seasons, the good season in 17 and 18, it's just looking more and more like a flash in the pan. At the moment, I just think that they played lovely hurling dodgers. They are capable of putting nice patches together, but they're consistently failing to deliver. And I just think that, like, again, Waterford outfought them. I think that Waterford hadn't won a game in the championship since 2017. Their last win was actually against Cork. But I think that Waterford, they might have lacked a small bit of belief for a long period. But I think if they played them again now, they could have won by a lot more. Waterford looked to have found a new player in Desi Hutchinson. He was very, very good. It was like the Waterford of old. They were never too far away, Waterford. They had 2 bad years, but they were never far away either. Like, the kind of way. They were never as bad as probably people thought either. Like, so they've had a poor enough underage record, but this is where it gets to the crucial part is they had a very, very good under-21 team that won in All-Ireland, and it was probably the best ever under-21 team in the history of the competition, and they managed to bring through most of those lads. So that's why Waterford, there's not an old team. There's potential there to improve. Now, Limerick will probably be too strong for the Munster final, but Waterford will have a big say in the quarterfinal if now they're in a quarterfinal at least. And I put it this way, any team who beats them will have to work for it. But, very, very disappointing from a Cork perspective. And look, you could say Cork, they have younger players coming through, but at the end of the day, Patrick Horgan is probably still carrying them, and he's not getting any younger. I thought Shane Kingston had a good game, but very, very disappointing from a Cork perspective. And if they don't bounce back, they'll be out of the championship next weekend because Dublin could easily take them to pay with that.
I think just before we move on to the other semi-final, you mentioned there Dublin and Cork. We'll not go too much into that because we'll probably cover it later in the week. But on paper, that looks like it does look like a very good match. I'm probably leading into this weekend. If he says that Cork and Dublin were going to play each other, you would probably heavily fancied Cork. But just the way the games went, if Dublin take the momentum that they should from that last 10-15 minutes against Kilkenny, they could really give Cork a good game.
Yeah, and Dublin will set up probably similar to Waterford. They're kind of like, they're big into this style to be physical. They'd work very hard. They'd be a proud team, Dublin are. And again, the hurling mightn't suit Cork. Like, Cork don't seem to like when it gets rough. Like, I just think Cork, they're going to have such a big bounce back. But the only thing is they can't play as bad as that again. Like, Waterford, you can take nothing away from Waterford. They were very, very good, and Ty de Burka was excellent there. But I think Cork, they just hit aimless ball down on top of de Burka a lot of the time. But it was just a very, very disappointing display from a Cork perspective. And I put it this way, Gerry, they were lucky there was no crowd in, because the crowd really would have got on their backs. And like Waterford, Waterford or the County County, there's not. It's funny, they don't have an absolute massive core support, but when the team is going well, they have an absolutely huge following the will. And I just think not having a crowd won't suit Waterford, because that was type of performance that would have got the Waterford public interested again. And it could have been nearly packed out for Waterford Limerick in the Munster final, and it could have been a real, genuine, brilliant occasion. Now, an empty stadium in the depths of winter and Limerick heavy favourites, I don't know, will it be as good? But Liam Cahill doesn't take any crap. He's a very, very good coach, Cahill, and he's after getting tune out Waterford. I think he's probably looking towards a long-term plan, but he's after blending in a few young players, and it's really, really clicked for him at the moment. Like, you've Colin Lyons and Desi Hutchinson there late the weekend. They're not old players by any means. They're newer, young players. And Waterford, I think Waterford, the most important thing, Gerry, not so much to win this match. It was important to win the match to get it under the bed, but the most important thing isn't that Waterford are in the Munster final. The most important thing is Waterford are back. I think that's probably the most important thing to take from that game.
Okay, and so the other game obviously then was Limerick 323 to Tipperary 217. It was another stinker of a day. The conditions were hard and conditions were poor, but Limerick looked good. What did you think of their performance?
Would you believe, Gerry, I wasn't excited for this game as other people were saying it to you on the show last Thursday, and I think I was probably proven right, because I don't think this was really. I just think that people, if anyone thinks that Tipperary are in a worse position now than they were yesterday or Saturday evening, they're delusional, because like this, I've seen it in hurling club championships. Like, Limerick came, they had the game the week before, their intensity was a bit more, they were a bit more up for it, they had a bit more depth in their squad. They won the game by 9 points. Doesn't mean anything in the greater scheme of things. I would argue it means absolutely nothing, Gerry, to be honest with you. Now, I could be completely wrong here, but I just thought last year Tip knew they had to win their group games because they've been caught in the group stage the year before. They won all 4 group games. They were well beaten in the Munster final. It didn't make the blindest bit of difference in the end come the All-Ireland series, And I think this year Tip, I don't know, like, they're probably, look, with no disrespect to Laois, they're probably going to be playing one of Clare, Dublin or Cork in an All-Ireland in the qualifiers now. They'd be very heavy favourites to beat any of those teams. So they're probably going to be back in a quarter-final anyway, to be honest, Gerry. Do you know, like, I know it's not a formality, but like, if they go to a quarter-final having won a tough game with momentum, like, then they could easily be, like, I just don't know, will a Munster crown be any motivation to those Tipperary lads? Now, that's probably being slightly unfair, because there's no way Tip didn't want to win that game yesterday. Like, you saw how animated Liam Sheedy was getting, and Sheedy is a very, very, very nice fella, and he's a serious taskmaster, so he'd want to have won that game definitely yesterday. But look, it didn't happen for them, and it means absolutely nothing in the greater scheme of things. Now, Limerick, it kind of, I put it this way, Jerry, we didn't learn anything from that game that we didn't know at 12 o'clock yesterday afternoon. You know, like, I just don't think that there was much learned from that game. And I think Limerick will take the 9-point win. Look, Limerick were a county. They struggled to win Munster titles for years. It looks like they could win 2 on the bounce. It was the same with league titles. But having said that, I'd say they'd rather have 2 All-Ireland medals and no Munster titles than 8 Munster titles and 1 All-Ireland medal. I think that you're going to be judging All-Irelands with the way it is now. And I think that that's where Tipperary will still have a serious say in this year's All-Ireland Championship.
Okay. So just before we leave the sort of the senior hurling, the draw was made today, and as we already says, Dublin will play Cork, and in the other game, Clare will play Laois, and then the winners of those, I think, they go in to play Wexford and Limerick. Isn't that right? Yeah.
Yeah, Wexford and Tip.
Yeah. Okay. So moving to the Joe McDonagh Cup, I know your feelings were that Westmeath needed to win to have much chance of continuing on in this competition. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be. Kerry ran out winners 219 to 14 points. So what do you think then? Is there any possibility of Westmeath coming back now, or is that done for them this year?
I think it's done, Jerry, barring an absolute miraculous series of results, to be honest with you. You know, I think that if it does go anyway as expected, Westmeath are out of the championship there, to be honest with you. So I think that that's disappointing from Westmeath perspective. They didn't really get going. They were doing well at the weekend, then the red card came and Kerry kind of just pushed on after that. Like, so look, Kerry were the better team. No points in otherwise, but like, Kerry are definitely in a very good position. I think Kerry, it's really a 3-way battle between Kerry, Carlow and Antrim at the moment now, to be honest. And look, there'd be 99% chance 2 of those teams will fill the 3 final spots. Now Meath are a proud camp. Meath have 3 matches. So if Meath win the 3 matches, they have a very good chance of getting to a final. But look, it's probably unlikely Meath are going to win 3 matches, Jerry, to be honest. But like, going back, Antrim and Carlow, I said a loss or a setback mightn't be the worst thing. A draw actually could be a blessing in disguise, because it was a point saved as well, Jerry. It maybe mightn't have been a point Antrim maybe really deserved either. So they'll take the point with a lot of learnings. And Carlow and Antrim and Kerry, I'd say, are the 3 teams left. Kerry, they've had 2 games, 2 wins, so they have a great chance to get into a final. I think they have to go to Belfast, or I think the game's in Belfast. They go to Antrim anyway, and I think they play Carlow at home. Carlow will fancy chances of beating Meath this weekend. That'll leave them with 3 points, and then they'll probably fancy chances of beating Westmeath if Westmeath have nothing to play for on the last day as well. So I think it's going to be a great competition. And Antrim Kerry, I think, is this weekend. Like, that could be a great game at Hurling, like, Jerry. Like, that could be, like, Antrim now are suddenly in a position where they're going to have to beat Kerry, really, you know, that kind of way. Like, so I think if Antrim, it's very, very open, but I think it's very much a 3-horse race at the moment. Is a Joe McDonagh Cup, and no disappointment for Westmeath, but Kerry the better team. They won the game, and they won it deservedly.
I think just you say, I think the competition now, the way the fixtures go, is there's 1 match this weekend and then there's 1 match the following weekend. So I think Antrim and Kerry's in 2 weeks' time. So it must be just whatever way they're able to balance the fixtures out, because I know Antrim's last 2 matches are like there's 2 weeks and then 2 weeks, so it seems to be a bit more spread out than 2 weeks in a row as it was. Obviously, the Antrim managed to get a late point. They looked to be beat. They scored the late goal, 5-16, 225 to get a draw away to Carlow. What did you make? Obviously, there seems to be a lot of social media about the equalising goal. It was a good finish. I think it was Donald Nugent scored it. Did you see the goal?
No, I actually didn't get a chance to look at it, Jerry. But just going back, and that Carlow had a rotten losing run. So even though they didn't win the game, if they take a point and then they have a great chance of ending their losing misery against Meath this weekend, but if they're not winning misery even. So 3 points in 4 games they certainly would have taken after a desperate run. So I think Carlow will actually, I think that was the type of game really where if you offered both managers a draw beforehand, while they wouldn't have said it publicly, I'd say they both would have bit your hand off. Do you know? Now, probably the way the game went, Darren Gleeson will be the happier with a draw. But having said that, when the luck's not in, it's not in. And Carlow, look, they should take the positive. They didn't lose the game and they played relatively well. 225 is a very good score. So, yeah, look, it's just Antrim, I suppose. It's for them now is the task, and maybe not. They're in a great position now, and they might have been in this position other years and they haven't taken their chances in getting to a final. So I think the main thing for Antrim now is to make sure that they don't mess up from this position again, and that they beat Meath, I suppose, in the last round, but definitely, and then maybe if they can get something against Kerry maybe as well. But the Kerry Antrim game, yeah, it's not like, it's not like the competition where I could say to you, look, these two teams look strongest. The three teams look every bit as strong. Antrim, Kerry probably slightly ahead at the moment, but Carlow maybe a slightly unknown quantity. They've only played the one game. We might know more after the Meath match this weekend. But I think, though, without dwelling too much on the next weekend match, I think if Carlow are going to get to a Joe McDonagh final, they have to be Meath next weekend. If they don't win that game, I don't think they'll get through.
Okay. So the Christy Ring Cup, the 2A, was played this weekend. Down came back. I think Derry led for a lot of that game, and possibly, if I'm not mistaken, I think Derry had a man sent off, and that seemed to change the game. Down come through 113 to 13 points, and in the other game, Kildare won 214 to 110. So, have you any thoughts about what may progress in that competition, or what's going to happen from here on in?
Yeah, Gerry, it's good that you had the phone charged this week, so we can actually talk about these games rather than a brief skim over. But if you look at it, Derry and Down seem to have the upper hand over Derry this year. Now, what I was thinking, now I don't know, it's purely speculation, but the fact Derry are out with the football now, there's some very, very good hurlers in that Derry football team, like Christy McKenna and Brendan Rodgers, to name a few. And if those lads came back, Derry are playing awfully this week. Now, look, it's probably not the way to go long term, Gerry. Just maybe pushing in lads the week before a game after training all year. Well, okay, it's been short training, but if they could get, I think that, to be honest with you, Gerry, I think if Offaly and Derry play the way Derry are going now, Derry have no chance of winning that match, in Newry. But I think if Derry had everyone playing, I suppose it could be short term gain for maybe slightly longer term pain, shall we say? That kind of way, because you might have a better chance to win the match, but the likelihood probably is Offaly to win anyway, and you might be back to square one then. So they're probably better off to stick with what they have for now. But Derry would be very disappointed because they're a county with a lot of potential in hurling, but Down probably are a slightly more traditional county, and they'll be happy now to be in this position where they're in the Christy Ring semi-final. They got it to have a 1-13 victory. They're after making a lot of progress this year, Down, because they're after getting promoted from Division 2B, which is probably the most important thing, to play at a higher standard of hurling in 2A. But now the fact two Christy Ring teams get to promote to the Joe McDonagh would mean Down could easily have a great chance of getting promoted to a higher standard of hurling in the Joe McDonagh this year, and same with a lot of teams. But Derry, after today's draw, it's very, very much an uphill battle. Kildare Wicklow was a good game. Kildare got the win, and Kildare are into the semi-finals as well, and they're another team who's making a bit of progress too. So I suppose the fact that, look, at the start of the year everyone would have said after you're going to win this competition, it's probably still going to be the way, but the fact that the finalists also get into the Joe McDonagh adds an extra layer. As I know teams might want to win a Christy Ring before they get up, but I think it's more important for long term for a county to be playing at a higher standard of hurling. I think that the Joe McDonagh is where any county with realistic aspirations wants to be.
Okay, so as you say, from these games then, Down and Kildare are into the semi-finals, and then we've got this 2B, which the draw was made, I think it was made yesterday, last night I think this one was made. Derry play Offaly and Roscommon play Sligo. So Roscommon and Sligo both lost first round games, and Sligo didn't play their first round game. Roscommon lost to Wicklow, and Sligo didn't go to Derry, and Offaly didn't play Kildare due to the COVID thing. So what I was just wanting to know is, I know there's not a lot of information about this competition, but do Wicklow not get another chance? Like, obviously they won their first game against Roscommon and then lost to Kildare, whereas the first round teams that lost get another chance, but Wicklow don't.
I think, Gerry, what happens now is that I actually had thought the two teams that lost would play the winners of the first 2 games, but they were playing one of those winners. It's just, I've been talking as nobody seems to know what the answer is with the format. To be honest with you, we'll have to go digging and get a definitive answer. But just going back in those draws, we'll probably talk about what we know for the moment. And what we know is that Roscommon Sligo was up, and I think the losers of that game are definitely out of the competition. So Roscommon, like, Sligo made a lot of progress winning Lory Meagher and Nicky Rackard, and then they kind of had a row with the management team then beforehand, so that would have been a big setback to them. So Roscommon might just hope to win that game. Roscommon are probably gradually keeping at a very, very solid level of hurling. Okay, they're probably never going to be a team that's going to maybe be a sustainable Joe McDonagh second tier team, but they're always going to be a county who will fight in hurling. They're a few proud hurlers, that kind of way. They probably haven't got the resources or players to maybe push on to be the level of maybe the Antrims or Kerrys or Carlows or even Westmeath, but they have enough players. They're a proud enough hurling county, and they'd like to be. They could easily get to a Christy Ring final. I think they won a few Nicky Rackards Roscommon have. So they're kind of they're an example of a team that's trying hard. They'd like to beat Sligo and maybe get to the next stage of the competition, and then Offaly and Derry. But like we time to talk about those games maybe on Thursday's show. But like it's Offaly though will be definitely are still the team to be. I think Derry are probably a small bit unlucky that they're going to run into Offaly at such an early stage as well, because it's a do or die game. If they had run into Offaly in the first round and lost, then they could maybe have been they could have had a second chance and learned a lot. But Offaly are an unknown quantity. But to be honest with you, if any form comes, Offaly should be good enough to win this competition.
Certainly, I think, whenever you look at the teams and you think historically, who have had, better hurling teams down the line, you're certainly looking at Offaly as the team to beat in that competition. So the Nicky Rackard Cup, the games this weekend, they weren't particularly tight. Comfortable wins for Donegal and Mayo. Donegal beat Armagh 313 to 19, and Mayo beat Tyrone 123 to 09. So those two progress, I believe, to the semi-finals. So Donegal and Mayo. Was there any surprises in any of those games for you?
Not really. Mayo would have been a lot higher level than Tyrone in recent years. I'd say Tyrone would be disappointed maybe with the marginal loss, but no, I think Mayo would have expected them. Donegal again, Armagh may be a bit disappointed not to be a small bit closer, but Donegal, they bet long for last week draft winning again. So look, it's just, Gerry, these results can be, I'd say if they were actually analysed in the same way as senior results, they could be strange results every year. We could seem like it, but the fact they're not, because teams have different players, have different panels, everything. There's a lot of availability. But I feel sorry for hurlers in those counties because there's not really any information coverage. Like we even struggle to get formats. Like they're not really, nothing is really readily available, and there's no real newspaper reports done on formats publicly around. It's one of the real problems of the GAA is how much of an imbalance there is at inter-county level, really, especially in the game of hurling. That kind of way. Like I don't know. Like I suppose people can say these tier championships are the way to go, but it's hard. No, it's very hard on players that have to be at that level and having no exposure. Nothing. Like okay, you are winning a competition, and it should be a big deal. It should be getting coverage. It should be a homecoming every month. But there's none of those things, Gerry. That kind of way. Like if Antrim win a Joe McDonagh, the Antrim public will get behind them. They'll be interested. But I just don't know, is it going to be the same for a team that wins the Lory, Meagher, or Nicky Rackard? To be honest with
you. Just on Armagh, obviously losing the game, they seem to be the team who have gone missing in the draw here again. 2B, Monaghan versus Tyrone and Longford versus Leitrim. So presumably those winners will end up playing Donegal and Mayo in the semi-finals. But just before finishing that competition, obviously Armagh would kind of be, whenever I'm thinking hurling counties in Ulster, I know sort of before they done away with the Ulster hurling title, Antrim had won a lot of them in a row, but it was always kind of the traditional counties where Antrim, Down and Derry, and then there kind of seemed to be a stage where Armagh were sort of starting to knock on the door. And I think there was a year I think they beat either Down or Derry and maybe got to the final and made Antrim work for it. In one of the last Ulster finals. So to me, it was kind of like looking at the score. It was a surprise to see Donegal beating them so handsomely. But yeah, we'll continue to try and look and find out exactly where these missing teams go in this competition. These competitions, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but we'll figure it out.
It's probably a fault on the part of me and you and all the media that we're not maybe as informed as we should be in this, but it doesn't seem to make sense. And I suppose this year with the whole COVID, but I just think it's a shame that this is never really spoken about, these games. And like I'd hate to say no one cares that they can't find out the format, but there isn't maybe that interest for people to go and look at the format of the competition. That kind of way. I don't know, is it the right way for these counties to be? I just like, okay, the argument is okay, they're getting games at their own level of development, but like I don't know, like how much are they developing? Like they're not getting any closer to the big county either, like that kind of way. Like so, I just think it's a shame. But just going back, which I had Ulster hurling, the Ulster, that's another problem with the GAA. Like the Ulster should be a lot stronger in hurling. Like there's a passion for the games in the province, and anyone who says otherwise is deluded. Like if you look at it, I think Antrim have always underbid for hurling, and it's always been a proud hurling area. Like they probably underachieved slightly at the account level for how popular the game is in the county, and then there are parts of Down where hurling is a religion as well, very much so, especially around the peninsulas there, like around Ballycran and Portaferry and those areas. But like Derry, to be fair, in recent years has really upped their game in hurling, and there are areas of Derry now where hurling is taken very, very serious, and obviously Slanmead is the obvious example. And then I suppose the rest of the province, then it's very much pockets as opposed to any real hurling strongholds. Now Armagh may be doing a bit, but Hurling wouldn't be. I'd say there'd be very, very few areas of Armagh where Hurling would be the main game, to be honest, Jerry. But look, it's a shame in the GAA that there's not Hurling. For a start, there's not more Hurling Ulster, and also there's not maybe more promotion in these competitions.
Yeah, I think for Armagh, sort of the one that jumps out to me is Keady. But as you say, there's it seems to be like throughout Ulster, there just does seem to be wee pockets of Hurling where like in Antrim, it's very much a North Antrim game, like where I live, like the closest GAA clubs to me. I think maybe there's about 4 or 5 close to me who don't play football at all. So I would have to go to like the likes of Glenravel or Ballymena for football, whereas like the village I live, there's a hurling club in the next village. There's a hurling club up in Larne. You've got Cushendall, you've got Cushendon, you've got Glenoriff. All these clubs around are all predominantly hurling. And then obviously, you've got the city. So it is interesting to see, how it develops in that. But before we go then, sorry, what were you going to say?
This issue, Jerry, Belfast is definitely improving. I think Belfast probably gets too much of a passion because there is a huge passion for Gaelic games in the city. Like if you look at it, Gods have been Ireland champions, and there's serious football and hurling clubs, judos in Belfast. And I think there's actually a passion for the game. Like I think they're not helped because there's no Cavan Park is a big disadvantage. But I think Belfast gets a bit. I think Derry City is a city where you could say they definitely underachieve in terms of the clubs don't do well there. But Belfast, I wouldn't. I think it probably gets slightly unfair passion in the city, to be honest. To be honest, Jerry, because like Belfast City, it's nationalist and unionist split majority, and for obvious reasons, a lot of the unionist community wouldn't have been involved in Gaelic games over the years. So, like if you look at West Belfast, then which would have a nationalist majority, it's populated with clubs of members. So I think Belfast is actually quite strong in GAA. I think Antrim have definitely got potential there for to do well in the next few years.
Definitely, certainly, as you say, that there are in the hurling point of view. St John's obviously is a big club. Ross has won a title. Was a few years ago. It was never lucky. Lost all the titles in a row. Another club, that's growing a lot is St Enda's. In Belfast, I think Sambo McNaughton was coaching them there for a while. But it's like as an Antrim, like as an Antrim, I would love to see the county, and like I remember, obviously it's not that long ago since Antrim were in a football Ulster final. Obviously Tyrone got the better of us in that day, but there's definitely interest, but hopefully it continues to grow, and I know there has been big efforts in Belfast to improve, to increase the participation in hurling. So just before we finish up in the hurling, then we had one game again in the Lory Meagher Cup, and Fermanagh have secured a place in the final of this competition. They won the first match against Louth, and they drew with Cavan this week, which means that they have a win and a draw from their 2 games in the competition, and now essentially Louth and Cavan basically turns into a playoff to play them in the final. So I know there's a famous saying about Fermanagh not necessarily being a hurling stronghold, and is it where Fermanagh, and is it Fiji or something? Is it Fiji? I know it's a big achievement, and obviously, hopefully them boys will get a bit of publicity.
Fermanagh and Fiji mightn't be hurling strongholds, but North Cork certainly is where Sean Og is from, and Nasaki and Satanto. And I just think that we may as well take this opportunity to pay tribute to Christy Ring, a proud son. Well, he's actually from Clyne, but played in the Glen in North Cork there. And Christy Ring, it's 100th birthday last Friday, so I don't think when you're talking about God's game, I think he is God, is Christy Ring. Like, so I think that it's definitely intended. But for Fermanagh lads, it's an achievement to get to a final in Croke Park. It's great for those lads to get to play in Croke Park, and Louth and Cavan now becomes the all-consuming final.
Yep. So I think probably that game is next weekend, and then I'm not sure exactly when the finals and stuff. I don't know whether there's sort of double header them up or what way. I imagine they probably will, but I suppose it's one of them things. There'd be a wee bit of disappointment where like getting to play in Croke Park in a final, and you're there on your own, no fans, but it's unfortunately it's a situation that we're in.
That's a common sense approach too, because like those finals might traditionally bring a massive crowd, but I think this year, like if it was a standalone game for Mana and Louder Cavern, it wouldn't bring 1,000 people to Croke Park, and I think that in an 82,000 seater stadium, the players' families should be allowed in a distance in a safe manner like that. I think you should definitely allow 1,000 people in that. To be honest with you, I think it's a shame that even these like, while they mightn't play in a packed Croke Park, they should definitely be allowed to bring their families. I think that's one thing. If the All-Ireland finals were played, if they gave maybe even 2 tickets to every player on the participating teams in every level, including the senior, that'd be a very, very fair solution, because you'd have less than 1,000 people in an 82,000 seater stadium, and it'd be easily measured for social distancing there.
Well, I think you're right on what you're saying. You know, like it's. I know even from just like looking at different sports and stuff, like you see some of these big stadiums in England and Scotland, and they're not allowed fans in yet. In the soccer up here in the north, you know, like some of the stadiums are like 2,000-3,000 seater stadiums, and they're sort of like 1,000 people maybe nearly allowed in. So it does seem unusual, but what can you do?
I'd be slow to criticise the North for that, but I think the North are actually using a common sense approach in that sense. Do you know, that kind of way? Like outdoor is a lower risk of transmission of COVID. I just think that there's no reason why a certain amount of fans can't be let in once it's in a safe, social distant manner. I don't see any problem with it, to be honest. I think there's far more dangerous things and issues. I just don't think supporters. I think it's one of those where it's an easy stick to beat them with. I think they can easily take away supporters without like it doesn't really look as bad. It doesn't look bad, but it doesn't really like you're not really affecting the business. So you know, that kind of way. Like, while if you close something else, maybe. It seems I put it. Supporters seems to be thing people they're quick to get rid of, and like quick to kind of clamp down on.
I think there was just sort of like, obviously I know in some of the club championships and stuff there were fans in, and then there was like one weekend and there just seemed to be the media just kind of went after everyone, like, and it just shut the whole thing down. But as you say, you know, like if you're getting to an All-Ireland final, you know, part of the occasion is sharing that with your family and the people that you trained with and the people you grew up with, you know. So it's unfortunate. Maybe, you know, it certainly doesn't look like it, but maybe some common sense will come about. But I suppose that's a story for another day.
Anyway, that's grand. Thanks very much, Gerry, for having me, and hopefully the listeners enjoyed the hurling chat.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you. So thanks very much for joining me. And as I say, everybody, any questions and stuff, get in contact, and we'll be back later in the week. Okay, thanks for watching.